Hello, Judith Shatin. It is great to have a chance to talk to you. We've been working on your music now for many rehearsals. I haven't counted how many, and it's really been fun.
That's
So,
wonderful.
um, for those who don't know, we are singing a piece called La Frontera in concerts in March 16 and 19. It happens that La Frontera will be the first piece on the program that day because it's a great starting piece. So let me go back and just bring you a little bit up to date on the basic facts about Judith's career. She has done so much. It's a very long piece on her website that tells about the numbers of compositions, her teaching career, her publishings, her degrees, her honorary degrees, and so forth. I think maybe the most basic thing you need to know is that she lives in Virginia and has taught for many years, although I think she's somewhat retired from the University of Virginia. Is that correct?
That is correct. I came to a point where, although I love teaching and so enjoyed the students, that I really wanted to stop jumping so regularly from one activity to another and be able to focus on composing
Right.
exclusively. And I feel very grateful to have that opportunity. Because
And
as you said, I have many projects that excite me that I want to work on, and the luxury of being able to do that is one I'm very grateful for.
you were, among other things, you founded the Virginia Center for Computer Music at the University of Virginia. And we don't do computer music, so we're not going to talk much about that aspect of your life, but it's just noted along the way.
Let me say one thing, because
Yes.
I'm the least likely person to have moved in that direction that you can imagine. I did not grow up tinkering with anything at all, but I am really fascinated with the possibilities of the world of electronic music, because it seemed to open up an additional universe of sound. So when I use electronics, it's never in, or very rarely, just digital. It's combining them with the world of acoustic sound. And in general, the music that I have that's so-called electroacoustic, that is, it combines them, it is not difficult because all you need are a couple of speakers and playback system. And one of the very first pieces that I did was for the San Francisco Girls Chorus, and they had never used electronics before. And this was actually quite some time ago. And it was really fun because one of the pieces that I did, called Click Beetle, it's a poem by Marianne Hoberman about beetles. And I played with all kinds of little things I had at home, like a handheld egg beater, a fork chinking on a cup, all kinds of little things that made beetle-like sounds. And afterwards, one of the choristers came up to me and said, "I'm not afraid of beetles anymore." So I thought that was pretty great, and maybe speaks to, I think sometimes people think that electronics, it makes things feel distant or always ugly or whatever. And it really, just like with acoustic music and with the voice, it's really up to the imagination of the composer how you use any timbral sounds.
And you have such an imagination because the realm of different kinds of things you've done is just extraordinary. I'll just mention the last piece we did of yours 7 years ago was called Jabberwocky. It was for men's voices. It was quite tricky. We worked on it a lot. I loved it. I think everybody loved it. Of course, you had a great text to begin with, but you have great choices of texts. So that was.
I have to say that choosing texts is something that, first of all, takes a lot of time. It just takes a lot of time. And I wish for myself I had a neat little algorithm that could tell me, okay, this type of text is going to immediately impress you as something that could speak through music. And it just is not the case. And when I find something that does, rhythms start jumping into my mind, timbral ideas start jumping, and then I know I have something. So it can take me as long to find a text as it does to compose the piece, because it usually reading through so many different things before I find one that feels as though there's a synergy there.
But in one case, you wrote the text, right? I'm thinking of the piece called Cole, a folk oratorio, and you wrote the libretto.
I did. And in fact, that was an incredible experience because I did a lot of research and travel throughout the state of West Virginia. This was a 2-year project. And the oratorio was scored for Appalachian ensemble of hammer, dulcimer, guitar, 2 Appalachian singers and banjo, and chorus, and keyboard, and electronics. And I actually went into a coal mine. They gave me a 3-hour training and a dog tag just in case anything happened, which was just a tad unsettling at the time. Yeah. But it was just a fascinating project, and I learned so much. I mean, the difficulties of working in coal mines are just hard to conceive of. But I met people who ran companies. I met people who had worked in coal mines, and just learned a lot about the history that I was sadly ignorant of. I used a few melodies that I was able to find in a book called Coal Dust on the Fiddle. But mainly I made up my own, and I made up my own text based on the reading that I did and the research.
And I imagine that the entire reason that you did this project is because you knew enough about coal mining to know that you wanted to draw attention to the problems, right?
Absolutely not. I actually, so I was commissioned to do a piece, and it was taking place in West Virginia. And I thought about West Virginia. It was an evening length piece. And I thought that the lore and culture of coal mining was something I wanted to explore. And the more I delved into it, the more I thought there was a story there to tell, and that it would have meaning to the people there and hopefully beyond. So I was inspired more by the process of learning about it. But I actually have done 2 recent choral pieces for which I wrote the words. One is called The Best Angel in Heaven. And I wrote that just because I was very moved reading the obituary of a wonderful teacher in PS9 in Brooklyn. And I was just moved to compose a choral piece based on the memories shared by her colleagues and students. She just seems like a marvelous woman. And then most recently, the Atlanta Young Singers has commissioned a piece, and I wanted to do a piece that had to do with what was on the choristers' minds. And so I had 3 Zooms with them. And I guess not surprisingly, what was on their minds is the pandemic. And one of the phrases one of them shared was a friend of hers asking, "How is your heart today?" So that became the title of the piece. And I wrote the lyrics, again, based on the concerns of those students. One of them, of course, being that they missed singing.
Sure.
So, yeah. So that will be premiered in March. Actually, that will be premiered in March, the week after your performances of La Frontera.
Well, now I think it's time to talk about La Frontera, because there's a big history behind that. And I would venture a guess that that was not commissioned, but you wanted to write it because
you're absolutely right. And it's funny, some of my friends ask me whether I ever write pieces on spec. I guess that they get that from architecture. And of course, being commissioned is wonderful, not only to be paid for one's work, but also because I really love the collaborative process. It's wonderful. But yes, I was just moved by the terrible situation we have in this country regarding immigration, the pain and suffering of so many, and the long-standingness of it. My paternal grandparents were immigrants. My husband is an immigrant. And I let some of my friends know that I wanted to do a choral piece about the situation. And one of them shared a book with me called Dreaming America, that is a volume of poetry that resulted from workshops run by a poet actually based at Washington and Lee University here in Virginia, named Seth Mickelson. And I was very moved by these poems and decided to set one. And although I am not a Spanish speaker, I decided to brave setting it in the original language because I felt that it was closer to that voice. And all the proceeds from score sales I am donating to the CARE Coalition Detained Children's program, which is based in Washington, D.C. So yes, this was very much a project of the heart.
One of our singers has mentioned that the music sounds Spanish, by which we mean either Spanish from Spain, because there's a little of that flavor to me, but also just any Latin American country. And that makes it very delightful to sing. As I look at the arc of the piece, it seems to me that it starts very straightforward and fervent, gets very angry in the center when I picture it as an adolescent male is thinking and telling us about how unfair it is that he's not allowed to come in. And then at the end, it gets slower and quieter. And my assumption is what's happening there is he's remembering what it was like to cross the desert and the exhaustion of going across it, because it feels like an exhausted ending. Would you go along with that?
Yes. And, you know, one of the things that that I feel in music, to me, is the importance to me of the emotional character. So yes, sometimes I was just thinking about this the other day. There are composers whose music has a very even, quiet surface. And it's not that I have written no music like that. For instance, I recently had a recording done of an amazing soprano of a setting that I did of Come Live With Me and Be My Love. And that is a very lyrical, pastoral kind of piece. But I do not shy away from the expression of stronger emotion, which I think, is characterized by rhythm, by pitch, by harmony. And when one thinks about it, we convey so much emotion in our speech that I see no reason why that can't be also done and intensified in music. And yes, the last part of the piece, which is talking about walking for days, I definitely felt the kind of sear, dry character and the intensity of the experience that must be. I mean, when you think about what people are going through walking from their home countries to this, or having, some parts that they're driven and some parts that they're walking, it's a very intense, difficult experience.
Of course. It's too bad we don't know exactly which young man wrote this text. Is that correct?
Well, I actually don't know if it's a man or a woman. I have we are not, they were not allowed to publish the names of the of those who created these poems. So all I know, it's an undocumented youth trying to immigrate and winding up in maximum security detention. I don't know any more than that. Wow. Other than that, they were assisted in creating these poems by Seth Mickelson and some of his students, which I think is wonderful that they help them give voice to the experience.
Yeah. And it's good that this piece is getting some performances, right?
Well, I'm very, very pleased about that, but I will raise one issue that I find as a composer, as an artist, troubling, and that is, I also did a solo version of this piece because I would like it to be as widely performed as possible. And I should also add that I did a version for male chorus that will be premiered by the Washington Men's Camerata on March 25th, conducted by Frank Albender, who's a wonderful conductor. But a couple of soloists who said, well, we really like this, but we don't feel we can sing it because it is not our story.
Oh, my.
And this kind of issue I find very troubling because as artists, we are always imagining others' voices. It would be incredibly paralyzing, it seems to me, if we could only tell our own stories. How could Tolstoy write Anna Karenina? How could any of us try to imagine other minds? And so I felt saddened and also very concerned by this response, because if we cannot imagine others' pain and joy and relationships and lives, I don't know how we can make art.
Wow. Well, we struggle in New Amsterdam Singers to be comfortable singing spirituals because almost the entire group, alas, is white. And yet, to me, I think we do have a right to sing them because they're American, even before there were Black spirituals. So part of our heritage. But it's so difficult.
But I have to say, I mean, as a lover of Bach, I mean, Bach isn't in my ethnic spiritual background, but right. I would be just distraught if that meant that somehow I couldn't identify with the beauty and the magic of that music. So I want to see inclusivity, not exclusivity, under the guise of it not being your story. I think it's important to be inclusive of voices, not exclusive.
This is an important topic. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you would really love to talk about? Because we have a little more time.
Well, I think that one of the things that draws me to voice and that I just continue to want to experiment with is just the feeling of using our own bodies in giving voice. To me, that's just such a compelling aspect. And one of the things, for instance, that I'll be doing with the Atlanta Young Singers is just experimenting with them on all the different sounds that they can make, ranging from the traditional singing voice to whatever we can do. And I have a funny story to tell about that because—
Wait, how young are they? What age?
Their age, I believe it's 7 all the way up to 17, so up through high school. But I think that, voices are so flexible. There's so many ways they can expand on written text through song. And one of the things that I guess I really try to do in all of my music that involves text is to somehow dance with, amplify something about the text. And I've really come to think of it as not so much as text painting, but as metaphorically engaging with what the semantic and emotional elements of the text are. So it feels like a really rich experience. And I have to say, I love it. I really love working with text.
We're going to be singing a piece by Louise Talma, whose name you surely know.
I do indeed.
It's just—
I knew Louise.
You knew her? Oh,
I did.
In fact,
I first met her at the Virginia Center for Creative Arts, and at 5 o'clock in the afternoon every day, she could be counted upon to be in the living room sipping a bourbon.
I knew you were going to say it was not tea.
It was not tea.
Well, there were so many correspondences between your work and your teaching and the huge amount of teaching she did. And I don't know if you did the residency. She spent, 41 summers at the MacDowell Colony. And
right. Well, now they don't let anybody.
She was a single woman, so she could spend 41 years. Now, probably your family wouldn't like it if you went to MacDowell.
Well, Well, first of all, MacDowell and other artist residencies now limit the number of times you can go because, of course, during the period when Louise Talma was going to these, certainly early on, the number of composers has exploded, the number of people who are interested in doing these kinds of things. I have been to MacDowell a couple of times and loved it, and to Yaddo, and more frequently to the Virginia Center for Creative Arts, which is about an hour from me, in the beautiful hills in Sweetbriar, Virginia, and it's wonderful. In fact, I have collaborated with a poet I met there and overlapped with for 3 days on multiple texted pieces. I set a very amusing poetry cycle of hers called Marvelous Pursuits, about a man with 2 mistresses whose wife is having an affair with a piano tuner. And that's for quartet and piano forehands. And that was so much fun. And I've collaborated with painters and also just made friends. I mean, I totally understand why Louise was drawn to spend her summers in that way. It's a marvelous opportunity to have time to yourself, but also to interact with all kinds of different artists. Exactly. And as far as teaching goes, I really enjoyed it a lot. And one of the things that I did, because typically people teach acoustic composition, and at a certain point I said, why is that? I mean, there are courses in choral arranging, but I couldn't find one in choral composition. So I decided to create one. And my colleague, Michael Slon, did readings of these student pieces so they could get a sense of them. But I have been really struck by the rarity of the idea of having a course in choral composition when there is so much to learn about vocal tessitura. There's so much repertoire to learn from. And it's quite different from instrumental composition. And there are many things you need to take into account. And whether, for instance, you want the text to be projected, as I certainly do in this particular piece, or whether you want it to be more sort of back in the mix, as they say. But there's a lot to learn and a lot to study. So that was one of the courses I developed. And another one was in songwriting. Same thing. This has become, I think, more type of course that's more frequently offered now because of the world of songwriting and contemporary music. But that was also fascinating because the timbre of voices in the early blues, and what happens as we get amplification and guitars come in. I mean, there are just so many different factors that interplay, but you're still dealing with text, and you still are dealing with choosing text and thinking about how you want to set it, and whether it's your own or whoever's, how you're going to interact with that. So it's been an opportunity not only to teach more traditional topics and ones such as digital media and computer music, but also about voice, and voice, the important role that voice plays in music. And I don't think there's enough attention paid to that. So I tried to do my little bit towards rectifying.
Yeah, well, you've been helpful to a lot of people and a lot of composers, and maybe now to a new generation of younger composers who will set more choral music if they figure out how high a tenor can sing. Louise Talma has the tenors on a high F, which isn't that high, but they have to stay there for 3 pages. And I thought, whoa, that's hard.
Well, one of the reasons that I really like collaborating with performers and conductors is I do care about the physical body and what it means. I would not write 3 pages of high Fs. But then again, there are extreme pieces that are extreme for a reason. I think of Peter Maxwell Davies' 8 Songs for a Mad King. So there are times when you're doing something that really requires it. But I want to always do it out of awareness and not because I'm not cognizant of what that feels like for, say, a tenor section to do over an extended period. But I'm not familiar with that piece. Maybe there's something about the text that really requires it.
Well, you'll see at the concert. It's a kooky text. It's E.E. Cummings.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, it is wonderful. Well, we look forward to your coming to the concert. I don't know which one, or we'll talk about that, and maybe both.
Yeah.
And we're so glad you could talk to us this afternoon, because you have a lot to say on a lot of topics, and it's all worth hearing.
Well, I really, really enjoyed speaking with you and have so enjoyed our collaboration and look forward very much to your performances. And I will be in touch about the details.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.